Hello, everyone. I am Damian Sevieri, and today I am here to discuss Native Americans in Hollywood. This is an issue that needs more light shined upon, because when I think about Native Americans in Hollywood, the first thing that I think of is the lack of representation and the misrepresentation in film. I couldn't name a Native American actor or actress, and that goes for a majority of people as well. Which is a problem, because with almost any other race, that isn't an issue. This is why I decided to research Native Americans in Hollywood. In this podcast, I will be discussing two main topics, which are the history of Native Americans in Hollywood and the representation of the Native Americans in Hollywood. The history of Native Americans in Hollywood. Native Americans have been in film for a very long time, dating back to 1894, when they appeared in a clip on Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. One of the first times they appeared in a movie with a long-lasting role was in 1914, when they were in the film The Battle at Elderbush Gulch by D.W. Griffith. In this film, they were portrayed as savage Native Americans who were scared of Euro-Americans' way of life, so they threatened them. This is one of the themes that is seen in many films after this one, the theme being that Native Americans are savage people who want to endanger the Euro-Americans' families that are trying to live their lives. In 1914, there was another movie that had Native Americans in it. Excuse my language. It was called The Squaw Man by Cecil B. DeMille. In this film, a Native American woman was portrayed as a noble savage who protected and helped the main character but still ended up dying in the end. This is the other theme of Native Americans that has been seen in many films after this one. The theme being that Native Americans are the wise, helpful people only there to help the main character and progress the plot. These themes have been seen in many movies, even movies that were about Native Americans. This is because any time there was a main character role for Native Americans, they were filled by white people. This is called whitewashing. Whitewashing is when you cast white actors to play non-white characters. This happened in movies like The Unforgiven, which came out in 1960, and Apache, which came out in 1954. These movies had the likes of Audrey Hepburn and Burt Lancaster as the main Native American roles. In these movies, they would have white people play the characters that had the personality and character. This left the Native Americans to only be seen as the stereotypes they were portraying, not allowing for any good type of representation. Those themes continued on in many other films until there was finally some progress in 1990 with the film Dances with Wolves by Kevin Costner. In this film, Native Americans were given a more honest portrayal of who they are and how they feel. This movie was a cornerstone for Native Americans in Hollywood because this was the start towards a better representation of them in film. This progress led to 1998 when the film Smoke Signals by Chris Erie was released. This was the first film that was made entirely by Native Americans. Ever since then, it has been on a good trajectory, but still not where people want it. Especially since there have been a few setbacks with movies like The Ridiculous Six by Adam Sandler in 2015. This movie brings back the stereotypes used on Native Americans throughout the history of them in Hollywood, and makes fun of it. This movie is meant to be a satire of old Western movies, but them doing this disrespects all Native Americans had to go through to finally get to where they are. But other than that, there have been movies that have made up for this, like Wind River by Taylor Sheridan from 2017. This gave an accurate representation of the Native Americans like few other films that came out during the time. Representation. Misrepresentation of the Native Americans is what has affected them the most throughout history of film. The natives have been plagued by stereotypes that have constantly been written for them. One of these stereotypes I mentioned earlier, which was the savage and the noble savage. The savage stereotype has been seen in many movies, and it is portrayed as the Native Americans being ruthless people who don't care about anyone but themselves. This is often seen when a Native American is unwilling to help a Euro-American, but this has also been seen as them not caring about their own people, like in Stagecoach 1940, when Native Americans in one tribe joined forces with the Euro-Americans to kill natives in a different tribe. This showed that the natives would do whatever to kill the other Native Americans. It showed that they just didn't care about their own people. The noble savage stereotype has also been seen in many movies, and its portrayal is Native Americans who do whatever they can to help the main characters. This means leading them to land, or gold, or healing them, or giving them advice. But these characters frequently have the fate of death after helping the main character. These characters' only roles are to guide the main character, and that's all. They're never given an opportunity to be an actual character, just a role player in the scheme. Other stereotypes of Native Americans in film would be the feather and paint. Although the feather and paint are a part of some tribes' cultures and what you see in movies, but what you see in movies is not that, because the directors don't care about it being accurate, but instead care about it looking Native American enough. For example, in the movie North of the Great Divide from 1950 by William Whitney, in a scene when the main character walks up to the chief, we see a complete mismatch of culture. It includes clothing from the Sioux, Navajo, and Ojibwe tribes. Those are examples of misrepresentation that has occurred over time. This misrepresentation has very negatively affected our views on Native Americans, making us think less of them, and making us think that the stereotypes are true because of the constant portrayal that they have in film. Wind River is a good example of how the times have changed for representation, because in the film they do a great job in not putting the Native American characters into one-dimensional stereotypes. Instead, they show that they're a human like everyone else. Not perfect people, but also not evil people, instead just people. They show the Native Americans as people who are untrustworthy of the white people, but not evil because of it, like older films would do. Instead, it is implied they aren't trustworthy of the white people because of the history that they have. This is only one example, but in comparison to the old Western films, this can really show how the Native Americans' representation has improved over time, but still has a little bit to go. I hope that this segment was able to give you an idea about Native Americans in Hollywood and help give you more knowledge about the issue. Thank you.